The organic from Peru didn't have pesticides. The organic from Mexico had more pesticides than the conventional.
Wow.
So think about that.
Yeah.
You as a consumer, you want to make the right choice. Or if you're someone who cares about organic, I know some people don't, but let's say you're someone that does care about organic and
Right.
you're at the grocery store. How would you know that one option actually has more pesticides than the conventional?
On today's episode, I have Jillian Forde here. And Jillian, I am so excited to have our conversation today because you are just incredible. And the wealth of knowledge that you have is going to be tremendously powerful today. So, Jillian, thank you so much for your time.
Erin, I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, of course. I know, we have a lot we're going to get into. We're going to talk about all things industrial farming. How do we start to learn more about our foods? How do we get educated about health in this capacity, right? I know as a mom of four, like this topic is super interesting to me because there's a lot I don't know. Like I know a little bit about how to look for things on labels. I know the importance of thinking about organic produce, stuff like that, why it matters. But there's always another layer to learn. And I think the more you can get educated, the more you can make empowered decisions for your health and wellness. And so that's why I'm super excited to chat more today, Jillian. And I'd love to start with just talking a little bit more about what really sparked your curiosity when it comes to food, when it comes to health, and when it comes to the work you're doing. Where did you start, and kind of walk us along that journey?
I've always been someone who has been really into my health and what are the things that I can control to be able to live my best life, feel absolutely amazing. And a part of that journey was first just eating healthier at the grocery store. And then I started to get really interested in what was being offered at the farmer's market. And I've always been like a foodie, so I've always struggled with diets when they would have you count your calories and your macros and make sure that like you can only get a small amount of like fats every single day. So that did not last for me. I really wanted to just eat real food and like enjoy the process of doing it. And I noticed when I would go to the farmer's market and pick up some amazing meats, some vegetables and fruits. And I was like, this tastes so good. Why does this taste so good? And it's so good for me compared to the options that are at the farmer's market.
Right.
And that really just had me go down a rabbit hole of not understanding, not just looking for foods that were amazing, but there's got to be something here of what these small farms are doing that actually really care about your health and that are farming in a way that's not only going to produce really super nutrient dense food, but also food that just tastes better.
Yeah. Yeah, so true. And, I've learned that slowly along the way, like as we've worked to source foods from different places, like there really is a difference. So I'd love for you to share, like in your passion and kind of what led you down this road, talk us through what you've started to learn related to what are smaller farms doing when it comes to farming practices. Why does food potentially taste different? And what are the things we can continue to get educated about?
Yeah, there are a lot of things that I would say certain small farms are doing that really stand out when you're someone who wants to shop for the most nutrient dense and delicious food, not only maybe to feed yourself, but also maybe to feed your family.
Yeah.
So I would say the main thing is that they're really focused on the soil health. So let's contrast that with the industrial agriculture system. And I categorize the industrial agriculture system as the options that are available at the grocery store.
Yeah.
Whatever grocery store you're looking for, the industrial agriculture system actually looks more like a monopoly where there's very few companies that really control the food supply. And so their priority is yield and shelf life. So when they're thinking about farming, those are really the two factors that they are looking for. This sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
However, the trade-off is they are not prioritizing the nutrient density of those foods, that whether that's fruit, vegetables, maybe even meat, for example.
Right.
And so as a result, um, you're maybe paying more for a product that's actually not going to give you as many nutrients. So I would
Yeah.
say the first thing is looking for how are those farms able to make sure that the soil is really nutrient rich. And
Right.
that is a question that you can ask them. You'd want to look for farming practices that they use that are called, maybe they're using cover crops, which is just a way of just a term that means that they are planting certain plants that provide nutrients to the soil.
Got it.
You'd also want to look for that they're rotating the crops. So instead of just putting crops in a certain place every single year, you actually want to be able to rotate them. And it's kind of like a way of like taking like a rest day. It is another way if you think about it, if you're like a gym person, you're letting that piece of soil just being able to rest and being able to get back nutrients. So when you do plant a crop that you're going to use to be able to really to be able to grow, such as like a broccoli, for example, then you're able to have really rich soil. That rich soil translates into a more nutrient dense vegetable, which then means that you're going to just have the most nutrients that are out of it. So
Yeah.
overall, I would say you'd want to ask the farmer, or if you're at the grocery store, see how is that farm prioritizing soil health.
Yeah. That's so powerful and interesting to hear. I'm curious, if you walk into a grocery store and you go up to an employee or you talk to somebody that's there, do they typically have that kind of information? Like, can they share most often, like what the farming practices are like, what the soil may be like? Do you feel like they have that education most often, or is it kind of hit or miss?
I would say probably not if you're at the grocery store. And
Okay.
that's because there's so many SKUs. They get their groceries really just from a few farms that are really meant for yield and just max volume.
Yeah.
And that's really where the main answer becomes looking for those farms that are able to produce in a way that maximizes soil health. There probably are a few. So, for example, like Earthbound Organics is one that's a big organic producer.
Okay.
I have looked at their website, and at the grocery store, they do practice those two farming practices that I just mentioned.
Got
So
it.
that could be one for people who are at the grocery store that they could look out for.
God, that's good to know. That's really good to know. And I know for me, I don't even always know what questions to ask, right? That's why I've been so excited to hear more from you about what do you even ask, right? What do you even want to know and why? And so when you think about industrial farming and where a lot of the produce comes from related to what lands in our grocery stores, what do you feel like maybe they're not disclosing that is actually really having a big effect on our well-being?
There's a lot, there's a lot to unpack to this question.
I
So
know.
I'll start with a study. So there's a farm that I absolutely love that is in Florida. They're called King Grove Farm. So huge shout out to them. They're a blueberry farm. You can purchase their blueberries directly. They are like a straight up organic to the core blueberry farm.
Wow.
And so they, out of their own money, they paid for a study. This was a double blind placebo study that they worked with this other lab where they took their blueberries. They took two other organic brands that were from the grocery store. They didn't disclose the name, but you could probably go to the grocery store and take a guess because there's very few options that are on the
Right.
shelf.
Right.
One was from Peru, one was from Mexico. And they compared that to two other brands that were conventional. The organic from Peru didn't have pesticides. The organic from Mexico had more pesticides than the conventional.
Wow.
So think about that.
Yeah.
You, as a consumer, you want to make the right choice. Or if you're someone who cares about organic, I know some people don't, but let's say you're someone that does care about organic and
Right.
you're at the grocery store. How would you know that one option actually has more pesticides than the conventional? And
Yeah.
that's where consumers are really getting deceived.
Yeah.
And I was also talking to there's very few experts out there who study pesticides use across the country. And they've seen that more and more pesticides are used. There's a lot of fraud where most of our vegetables are coming overseas.
Yep.
And because there's a lack of really rigor in those pesticides that are being used and those being labeled correctly. There's a lot of organic fruits, vegetables that are coming in that are labeled organic, and they're actually conventionally grown.
Wow. Wow. That is fascinating. One of the things I would love to talk about here too a little bit is, why we need to be concerned about pesticides, right? Like having them on our foods, right, as a part of what we're consuming is a really big thing to understand as far as overall health, longevity, how we feel, gut microbiome, etc. Can you touch on a little bit regarding pesticides and why knowing that they are a part of what we're eating is a big deal and how they really affect our health?
There's, I would say, a lot of ways that I would say the research is I would say there's a lot of more anecdotal research, and that's because there's definitely not, unfortunately, it's not like a very lucrative area, because most of the research goes either maybe it's pharmaceutical drugs where there's actually going to be an ROI from it. But being able to do research in a very rigorous way to determine like, oh, pesticide use in broccoli causing cancer, not many people are going to shell out the money to be able to pay for that,
Right.
unfortunately.
Right.
So there are different signs that actually of pesticide use certainly causing health issues.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely give just a few examples. I know of two farmers that I have worked with that actually I source for my company HoneyNut from. Interestingly enough, they actually were conventional farmers before.
Wow.
They switched to pesticide-free farming because actually, even though the farmer was spraying, it was actually their spouse who ended up getting health issues, not getting sick, gut issues. And it came to the point where they were like, we can't continue to do this because this is actually impacting our health. So they've ended up switching.
Wow.
There's also research as well on just overall, I would say, the use of pesticides with related to Parkinson's disease. So there was another woman who I think is great, Rhonda Patrick, who has a podcast, and she was talking about a study of people who live near golf courses.
Yeah.
And the spray of pesticides on golf courses, they actually have a higher incident of Parkinson's disease long term. So it's that pesticide that's sprayed on the grass, that runoff, you're then drinking the water, that contributes down the line into additional other diseases. Yeah. So those are just, I would say, just some two clear examples. And then on top of the fact that there's been thousands of people who have sued these chemical companies for the use of pesticides and for it contributing to their health, whether that's cancer, Parkinson's disease. So I think it's definitely clear if you look out for it that pesticide use over a long period of time, it's not as though you're going to eat it once and then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I'm going to feel sick, I'm going to come up with a disease. But that constant exposure over a long period of time, that's where it can get I would definitely not recommend it if it just my opinion.
Yeah, my opinion too. And one of the things I've talked about here on the podcast before is just this idea of overall toxic load, right? And with the environment we live in, the lifestyle we lead, stressed out, right? Lots going on as far as chemical exposure. I've talked a lot about products and endocrine disrupting chemicals. Like pesticides falls into this category of starting to get educated about what's in our environment, what's in our foods, how are things sourced, what can we actually control and get educated about, and why that matters for our health. And that's what I love most that you're sharing, Jillian, is we just need to be aware. Because then when we're aware, we can be more educated consumers and make more empowered decisions, kind of like we talked about. And so I'd love for you to kind of move into talking to the person that is resonating with this and wants to figure out a way to find smaller farms, find ways to really understand, where is my produce coming from? What are their soil practices? Is there a best way to search these farms out or find what's in your local area beyond your grocery? I'm just curious what you would coach somebody through who wants to really figure out how to implement more of this. We'll get back to our conversation shortly after this message. If you are an overwhelmed and completely confused mom who just wants a simplified, easy to follow, and understandable plan when it comes to their health and wellness journey, then you're in the right place. As a wellness coach, I focus most on empowering women to follow a highly personalized and bio-individual plan that actually gets you results and that feels sustainable for your longevity. I'd love to invite you to set up a free coaching call to talk about your health and wellness journey. Head to erinshreer.com/coaching to set up your call today. Again, that URL is erinshreer.com/coaching to set up your call. And to make it even easier, head to the show notes of this podcast and click free coaching session to set up your call ASAP. Now let's dive back into the conversation.
Yeah, I would say there's really 4 key things that people should look for to really source like the most nutrient dense, and of course, I would say delicious foods. So the first is transparency. You want to make sure that the farm that you're sourcing from is transparent in their practices. If you go on their website, they should have a section on their website that explicitly says what their farming practices are. If they are hiding it, that is definitely a red flag. Another way could be looking at like if they have social media. Are they showing enough videos, photos where you're able to see the story of how it is that they are farming every day to day?
Yeah.
So that would say that the first thing, they should probably have an email where you should be able to call them or email them to find out, ask them more questions like what I was talking about here of how do you ensure that the soil is really nutrient dense? And they should respond and give you a clear answer. Like at the end of the day, it's your body. You're making these health choices every single day. So you have a right to know what goes into your food. So number one is that transparency. And then number 2, I would say is that farm visibility, that access. So do they post pictures, videos? And even if they have a farm store, I also think if they have a farm store, which there are a lot that do, or if they allow you to be able to go on site, let's say if you wanted to pick up your food, even if you had no intention to actually go, but just knowing that they actually have a farm store and that they're going to be visible on their farming practices just makes it more likely that they are doing what it is that they say they're doing. I feel like a lot of the reason why that we have gotten into the system that we are with industrial agriculture and a lot of the fraud that's going on is because there's not a lot of transparency in what's actually going into our food and how that translates into how it is that we feel in our health. So definitely that transparency is the second. The third, I would say, is soil health. Since soil health is not only going to be important if you're someone that only eats vegetables or fruit, it's also going to be important if you eat meat, which leads to the fourth area is if you're someone that buys meat, you want to make sure that it's pasture-raised and organic. And this also kind of falls back to the first point about those transparency and those farm practices.
Right.
Pasture-raised is another area that's become a big buzzword. And so the next question that you want to ask that farmer is, okay, are you supplementing those animals with any feed? Because a lot of farms will greenwash, or is another way of making you feel good about a choice you make because they'll talk about, oh, they roam on pastures. It's like, well, are you feeding them anything that's in addition to what's on pasture? And if so, what are you feeding them? Are they using pesticides with it? If it's cows, you want to make sure that it's 100% grass-fed diet because there's really good research that 100% grass-fed cows are going to have a higher omega-3 to 6 ratio compared to cows that are fed a maybe grain, corn, but not a grass-based diet. Chickens also make sure it's organic and pasture-raised. There'll be companies that will really focus on the pasture-raised aspect, making you think that it's only eating what is foraging, but actually they're feeding it with a supplemental diet, and you want to make sure that it's also going to be organic as well.
So interesting. So interesting. I think, for me, as I'm thinking through this, I know of a couple small local farms where I live. But if someone wanted to figure out if someone was close to them, do they just go to Google? Is there like a farm network? Like, I'm just curious, how do you actually find these places? But then how do you still like make this feel manageable and joy filled and not like filled with tons of research and overwhelming? I'd love your feedback on that.
Yeah. So if you're someone where there's a farmer's market near you, that could be a first place. Like you could look up a farmer's market that is near you, and that could be a place to get to meet farmers that are maybe within like a 200 or so mile radius from you. Then you could get their things and ask them these questions.
Got it.
And I've also started a company that does a lot of this research
Yeah.
for you. And that's the company that I'm super excited about. And it's called HoneyNut. So we interview farmers, we vet them for all these different areas that I was just talking about. And we make it really convenient for you to be able to get access to those kinds of foods.
That's so good. I would love to kind of transition into that and have you talk a little bit more about what HoneyNut is and, how you got started, which we've talked about a little bit, but what it is and how people can essentially start to learn about your business and how they can use it either as an educational resource or as a way to actually source some of their food. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So I actually started, it goes back to my story about going to the farmer's market. I found myself literally planning my weekends around going to the farmer's market because a lot of these farmer's markets, they're only open maybe one day a week. And it's like only a few hours on a Saturday, at least in my neighborhood. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And I'm literally planning my weekends around when it is that I can actually drive to the farmer's market to get my own food. Like, this is 2025. Like, why isn't there a convenient way to be able to get access to this kind of food? So
Yeah.
that's what really got me starting to think about this and creating HoneyNut. So I go out and do my research of different farms, not just from my local area, but also just larger surrounding areas. So my area is in the Northeast. So that's where most of the farms that I work with, but I'm definitely expanding that to more farms as long as they fit the main four criteria and
Right.
being able to provide that delivery, whether it's local to my area or being able to ship to customers wherever they are.
Got it. So you ship too, which is super
Yeah.
cool. So tell me, as far as foods goes, is it all produce? Is it all meats? Is it eggs included? Like, what does what you provide look like as far as options?
Our vision really is foods that are non-toxic, chemical-free, and going to be really nutrient-dense and delicious. We're
Okay.
definitely also expanding into areas that are not necessarily food, but areas that people are still looking for non-toxic solutions for. So
Yeah.
skincare, that what you put on your face also just goes into your body. So that's an area that we also have as well. And also looking for other areas where people are starting to think about a cleaner way as well to be able to utilize that. But I would say the main part that is the most of the products that we offer are meats, vegetables, fruits, and other common shelf stable items. So such as the coffee that we use is like free from toxins, free from heavy metals, as
Yeah.
well as also farmed in that way that we look for. And so it's like olive oil is another example.
It's so cool. And I love that you're doing this because, again, for me, and I think about my listener, I think about the women that I serve and just families, right? American families. Like, how do you actually make this feel less overwhelming, feel a little bit more tangible, right? And manageable as far as implementing it into your busy, chaotic lives. And I think when you have resources where you can get educated, the sourcing is done for you, and you have a dedicated place to learn, like it makes a massive difference with cutting through the noise. Because as you know, the health space is just filled, infiltrated with so much information about every single topic and everything we should do and should buy and shouldn't do and shouldn't buy. And it becomes paralyzing. And I know women, especially, we just try to absorb all the things because we want to do well by our families, by our friends, by ourselves, by our, everyone around us. But at some point, it just becomes too much, right? And so I love that you are really trying to create a space where here's where we've done the sourcing, right? We've done the vetting, and we've also decided to figure out a way to actually help you fulfill your needs by making it simplified. And that's such a gift, Jillian. And I love that you're doing this. And I think it's just tremendously powerful to continue to hear like what you have done as far as research goes, because that is the thing that feels the hardest for me personally. One thing I would love to talk about quickly, because I am thinking about the person that listens to this that maybe still has the grocery store or industrial farming as their main option, right? Like they have to find a way to make that work. They have to find a way to just have that be the best possible option for their family, right? Given their situation or whatever it is, right? Maybe where they are, they don't have access to things. So I'm glad to hear that they can get into something like HoneyNut. But if there is someone who has to kind of lean the most on the grocery store, I'm just curious, is there like a best practice to try to figure out what are the best options to buy? Is there something specific you can look for? Or how can you really navigate that with as much intention as possible without it feeling like I don't even know what to do, you know?
Love that question.
Yeah.
So I would start with looking from farms options that are at the grocery store where the company only sources organic.
Got it.
That's because you want to know that that producer is really a company that really lives by organic, and that's an area that is of a value to them, and it's not just another line item really in their business.
Right.
Those companies where they source conventional and organic, that's where it starts to get really questionable because they're just really incentivized to produce the lowest possible standards of
Right.
organic.
Right.
So like here's, I'll say a perfect example. So a lot of the strawberries, okay, I'll just say it. So Driscoll's, as probably the biggest producer of fruit.
Yeah. Yep.
Everyone knows of them in the grocery store.
Yep.
So their fruit, their strawberries, they're they're grown in a hydroponic way. Or another way of thinking about that is it's essentially grown in these plastic bins, which that sounds fine. However, if you're someone that's concerned with your plastic exposure over a long period of time, they're not actually grown in soil. They're grown in these plastic bins that are then essentially given a feeding tube to provide the nutrients instead of how a lot of people think their fruit should be grown, which is in soil that provides those nutrients. So that could be one way where you're getting that extra plastic exposure. So,
Yep.
so as an example, that's an example of a company where they're growing both organic and conventional. So I would then look for, are there other alternatives that are just really sticking to organic, and that's what they care
Right.
about.
Right. And so on a label, because again, I've seen brands where it says organic, but then it's not necessarily organic, right? Once you start to dig into the label or you dig into the practices or you start to learn about the brand, you realize like that's not technically organic. So I'm curious, in your experience or research, is there something specific you can look for on a label that actually is legit, right? Or makes something feel like, okay, I know that this is probably the best choice I can make.
Yeah. There's another add-on certification, which some farms are starting to put more, are really growing an adoption of because it is a free add-on certification, and it's called the Real Organic Project. So it's an add-on certification to organic. So they have to be organic as a baseline, and that Real Organic symbol that shows that okay, that farm, those animals are pasture raised.
Yep.
If it's vegetables, fruit, it's soil grown. It's not going to be hydroponic. So it's just going to have way more nutrients. You're not going to have that extra plastic exposure if you're
Right.
really mindful of not having as many plastics. So that would be one thing I would also look for because some of those might be available at the grocery store. There's also another add-on certification that some companies will look for, which is the regenerative organic. That one
Yeah.
I also like. I would say
Okay.
that one's more common in the shelf stable section. So maybe if you're looking for beans, nuts, I don't see it as much in the actual produce aisle.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. And I have never even heard of either of those certifications. And so, like I said, there's always another layer, right? There's always another layer to slowly unpack and learn and get educated about. And, my goal here with talking to amazing women like you is to give families, women, people in our society just a glimpse into what are the other things you can get educated about, what can you learn about, and then figure out what works inside of your lifestyle. So one kind of fun question I want to quickly ask you, just because this is something that I'm always learning about and I want to talk about, is actually how you store your produce, wash your produce, stuff like that, right? So full transparency, like I buy produce at our grocery store. I do the best I can. I try to lean on organic. It's really interesting to learn about Driscoll's, right? And how they actually grow their strawberries. One way or another, we're probably getting plastics, pesticides. Like that's just the reality of our family, at least the season we're in. Like we do the best we can, but there are moments and seasons where it's not necessarily as clean as I would like it to be, right? I try to control the controllable, if you will. So in those kinds of situations, like what are the things you can do for storage and cleaning that can just help maybe get rid of some of that or at least make it feel a little bit cleaner, if you will? Just
Oh,
curious.
wow. I have never actually thought about this. If storing or washing actually is able to preserve it or improve like the nutrient density. I actually don't have a good answer on that. I'm actually not sure.
I am curious, like, how
Yeah.
do you, like, when you buy, like, even if you go to the farmer's market, like, what do you do to actually clean and store your produce? Like, is there some special practice you use to kind of keep it as fresh as possible for as long as possible? I'm just wondering, like, what you actually
Yeah.
do when you buy your produce too.
Oh man, I there probably should be something that I do that's like really special, but there really isn't. I keep it simple because it's like, hey, I guess we're all really busy. But there probably is some way I would say that can like certainly like preserve the shelf life.
Yeah,
And then
good
once
stuff.
I know, I will let you know.
I love
And
it.
I will
Good
be
stuff.
doing it. We'll do it together.
Yeah, we'll do it together. I mean, I'll give some of the things that I've learned. So
Yeah.
I know there's like produce specific cleaners from clean ingredient companies, right? I have tested some of those, like Branch Basics, I know has one. Truly Free has one, like specific for cleaning fruits and vegetables,
Oh,
trying to get
cool.
rid of, some of the chemical exposure that
Oh,
inevitably
wow.
is probably on some things, right? I've also just used like water and baking soda and let my produce sit in water for like 15, 20 minutes. And I've seen people use that just to essentially try to clean them in some
Oh,
capacity. I know people have used like O2 bubblers. I've seen that, which is
you liking
interesting. And
it?
yeah, it's like a little pot, and I don't know if it's CO2 or O2, but you like put it in there. It's like an ozone thing, and it just like filters the water and helps clean the produce. But I think stuff like that is also interesting to just get educated about and learn, because there's a lot that's out of our control. That's the hard part.
Yes.
So like, how do we keep getting educated? How do we make the best choices possible? How do we know what questions to ask towards farmers that really will be serving our health in some capacity? But in those moments where we maybe don't have as much of that opportunity, like what else can we control? And I know like trying to clean your produce or trying to like do things at home can also just be something you can lean on. And so I wanted to just bring that up because I think it's so important to always be empowering women and families to say, we do the best we can, right?
Yes.
There is so much happening and we do the best we can. And that's why, I'm so grateful for our conversation today, Jillian, and everything that you've shared. It's just been so, so empowering for me and educational. Like I've learned so much, so, so much.
Oh my gosh, Erin, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Will you quickly share how people can learn about HoneyNut, how they can connect with you online if they want to just kind of, pick your brain or get educated more?
Yeah. So I am Miss Jill Forde. That's my personal Instagram, TikTok, and then the HoneyNut Instagram and TikTok. Those are HoneyNut Biz. So yeah, I'd love for people to reach out. I'd love to connect with anyone who's cares about their food.
Yeah, I love that. And we will make sure everything is linked in the show notes of this podcast. So if you are interested in learning more about HoneyNut or connecting with Jillian, please do so by going to the show notes and getting her information. And Jillian, thank you again for your incredible expertise and time today. I am so incredibly grateful for you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Erin.
Sure thing. Take care.
You too.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I know balancing time and energy can be a challenge, and I'm so proud of you for listening in and investing in your wellness journey. I feel incredibly grateful to connect with you and for the opportunity to share more knowledge, stories, and encouragement related to all things wellness. I would love to hear how this podcast has served you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review on either iTunes or Spotify. Your support truly means the world to me and helps me reach more women just like you and me who are looking to transform their health from the inside out. Plus, when you share this episode with a friend, we invite more women in to learn alongside us. What a gift. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we know, the better we can do. For ourselves, for our families, and our future. Well done on taking the step towards a healthier, happier you. Until next week, stay empowered and stay well.